Hello and welcome to Gary's Classic Cars, episode 3 of the Mark II Fiesta XR2 restoration. We start off with the floor repairs. As you can see, this is the poor repairs undertaken by previous owners, so the only option was to get the grinder out and cut all this out along with the inner sill. Fortunately, the floor hadn't been eaten too far in and the chassis number was still in place. Once I cut this out, I cleaned all the edges up, cut my new inner sill down to fit perfectly, and then fabricated a new floor to sill section, as you can see next. I then fabricated a new floor section. I was lucky that the chassis number hadn't been damaged with corrosion, so I managed to salvage that. I also installed a new inner sill which was trimmed to fit. Once I completed this element of works, I cut the front floor pan out back to the good metal along with the inner sill, ready to accept the new replacement panel. The panel was placed on the top and marked underneath and trimmed to suit the gap required, and so I could then fully butt weld it in. As you'll see, this panel has a return edge on for the inner wheel arch. As mine had corroded slightly higher, I had to extend this with a fresh piece of metal. Fully welded in now and ground back, I was really happy with the results, and the new inner sill welded on as well. I also coated it with a red oxide paint to prevent any future corrosion. I then tackled fabricating the new inner outer bracing, which had corroded similar to the other side. Once this has been done, I red oxided it all underneath to blend in and ensure I had a good key for the underseal. Also did the same with the inner of the floor pan. This looked really well, and the repair marks were virtually invisible. As you can see, the chassis number is visible, so I was really happy with that, and that got a coat of red oxide as well to protect from future corrosion. I then moved on to the inner wing. This had corroded behind the header tank buckle, just like the other side, along with the front edge where the indicator goes in, again very similar to the near side, so I cut my repair panels up and welded them in. As you can see, the leading edge of the front panel had to be fabricated. I then welded in the new repair sections in the front wings, lower, front and rear. Again, I swayed the body panel of the vehicle so that the water would flow over them in the future and not into the joint, creating a rust trap. Finally, once it was all welded together, I rubbed down the wing and found a little low spot which is there on the left hand side at the top, which I filled in with a bit of filler just to get rid of it, along with the joints where the welding had been done on the front wing repairs. These are a section of the inner wing and the floor pans that I'd cut out, heavily corroded from previous bad repairs. Chassis was next to repair. This had corroded, had been patched poorly in the past. Cut the inner and outer section off and then fabricated a new replacement section, which I kept trial fitting to ensure I got a good fit prior to welding. This was made out of a couple of pieces and welded together with my MIG welder. I then installed it, the inner section and then the outer skin, flush but welded, and it looked great, real good finish on it. As you can see, it looks like original, and once the stone chip was applied, it looks like it's never been touched, which I was really happy with. Only a small section of corrosion on the scuttle panel on the offside, so I was quite happy with that and quite an easy repair. On these Fiestas, for some reason the door tops seem to split. This is no different on this occasion on this vehicle in 3 places, but it also rotted away below the quarter glass. I had to make a little U section which holds the inner and outer skin together, and must have just got trapped with water over the years. Finally, I got the offside in primer and the front panel. I was really happy with the results and drilled all the holes for the body kit. The next stage was to put some stone chip underneath once I finished red oxiding it to prevent future corrosion. Now fully primed and in the sun, it was drying off lovely, and I moved forwards to stone chip under the front wheel arches, just so I could get some extra protection from on top of the original. The engine bay was the next job. That was a right mess with the oil from the leaking engine oil, but once I cleaned it up, it was actually really good, so a bit of a scuff off. Apart from the front panel, which had been replaced in the past, and it had a little bit of surface rust on, I managed to clean that off and trust it with some rust treatment. Again, once the cleaning was done, I primed the inner wings and they looked fantastic, especially where I'd done my repairs. The next stage was to get some silver base coat underneath the car and under the wheel arches in the engine bay, and this was the final lot I had to do before I tackled the top paint job, and I was really happy with the result. Just a bit horrible putting the lacquer on because it's very sticky and you get a lot of blowback, which I didn't get with putting the silver on. It seemed to go onto the car really well, but that's a small price to pay to have a shiny underneath. finally, once the engine bay was in silver, I managed to get some 2-pack lacquer on it using my little compressor and my filtered mask, and it looks really good, nice and shiny, but a few little dry edges, but that's to be expected because there's lots of little corners you get stuck with. I then tackled a repair to the bonnet. These are quite hard to get these days, so I ended up having to peel most of the edges back and replace some sections because the corrosion had eaten in quite badly and the metal was really thin. Once cleaned back, I treated it with rust treatment and fabricated small flat sections and welded them in, then placed the return flange back over and welded it up the best I could. Although it doesn't look neatest, it's very solid and it doesn't creak or anything when you shut the bonnet down. So this all got cleaned up a little bit better than what it was, and the skimmer filler just on the edges. I constantly tried the bonnet for gaps to ensure that it lined up with the wings because I'm quite fussy about gaps on panels, and I was very happy. However, this bonnet wasn't the original bonnet to the vehicle, as I found out when I rubbed the underneath down, it had some coatings of light blue paint. I had to do quite a bit of filling on the near side section because this is where most of the corrosion had happened, on that edge. But after 4 or 5 attempts, I managed to get what I wanted. I then primered it and blocked it down, but then found I did need to do a few more repairs, but eventually I got there. Also did the underneath as well. There was a few little bits of rust spots, particularly where the plastic clips hold on, so they got cleaned off, rust treated and primered and ready for the top coat. Eventually the car got masked off. I wasn't going to paint the roof initially because it was in really good condition, but following the paint job it was slightly different shade, so I ended up doing it. This is why you see it masked off at the moment with all the windows. This was in preparation to paint the satin black around the openings, which is quite bespoke to the Fiesta XR2. As you can see here, it's all done. I then masked off the inner door edges to prevent any overspray from a future outside paint job. Finally, the car was in full grey primer, which is great because it's always better to have a full colour of base coat primer, so that when you put your base coat on, you don't get different shadings coming through. So I managed to 2-pack prime it all in a light grey high build and block it down, which got rid of any repairs I needed. I then put a guide coat on. This was then to try and resolve any sort of low spots, although I did miss a couple and they're only naked to my eye, as I know where they are and probably most people will never spot them, but I will need to address them in the future. However, being metallic, it's very difficult to blend in, and that's one of my worries I have in case I don't get the match and end up painting the whole of the car again. So again, a bit more black guide coat on, blocking off, just so I could get the bonnet repaired because this is quite important. Finally, I had to mask the whole underneath off because I didn't want any overspray going onto the freshly painted underneath, which is a bit of a task on your own. Could have done with an extra pair of hands, but however, I did manage it after a night, which was about 4 hours work, which sounds a lot, but it is very important to prevent any future overspray. And finally, we're ready for the top coat of Stratos Silver, which will follow in my next video. Hope you've enjoyed so far, and look forward to posting my next video, which will be in a few days, which will be the final one of the completion of the car. As you can see, it looks very well here, but looks deceiving as you've seen from the previous videos. Anyway, ta-ta for now.